for a number of years now, something like, how many years? 20, about 15 years. And something about Chinese, what I call wisdom literature. Not just Confucius, but lots of deeply thoughtful persons speaking about wisdom from their perspective, of course. So Bhagavad Gita is, I call it a wisdom literature. Similar, but different. And Bhagavad Gita, within Bhagavad Gita, one of the ways of describing what it is, it's a treatise on the yoga system. Going like this, because compared to a ladder. And then there's rungs on a ladder that lead to something. And it's a place of higher consciousness, just keeping it really simple. Higher consciousness. Yoga literally means to link or connect our consciousness with higher consciousness. And that higher consciousness has a source. And that source, according to the stage that one is in the yoga system, it's thought of in a different way. Something, 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 something. There's a nice verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, everything that exists comes from him. He is the original source of everything. Then he says in reverse, everything comes from me, I'm the source of everything. Checkmate. And then yoga is to connect with that source of everything and to understand as much as a tiny living entity can understand about the source of everything and the connection between our tiny self and the source of everything. And that's yoga. And Bhagavad Gita is a treatise describing that in simple language. And it's been around a long time. Before Confucius, for sure. Before any learned person, because he's the source of everything. So he existed before anything existed because he's the source of everything. And Bhagavad Gita teaches us how to make that connection. So this is a nice illustration showing the context in which Bhagavad Gita appeared. Bhagavad Gita appeared as part of a big history. And right in the middle of that big history is a scene where the person who's the driver of the chariot, that's Krishna, dark complexion. And the person who is the warrior in the back, that's Arjuna. And maybe you can pick it up because you're from China, so you know about the Monkey King. Yeah, of course. So there he is. On Arjuna's flag is the Monkey King named Hanuman. He has a different name in different cultures, but it's Hanuman. So there's this connection. And before the scene is, there's the good guys and the bad guys. It makes a good story. Virtuous, corrupt. Murderous, da 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 da. No virtue at all. And the virtuous. And there's a conflict. And so attempts to resolve the conflict were made. The other fellows said, no way, there's going to be war. I can't live on the planet with those other people. It's us or them. That's it. No settlement. So there's a war, a battle that's been arrayed. And just before the battle is to begin, Arjuna, the warrior, one of the super warriors, requests his chariot driver. Krishna takes the position of driving Arjuna's chariot. It's metaphorical and it's literal. I want to see who's on the two sides. And he looks at who's on the two sides, and it's cousins and his own family members. And he gives chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita reasons and virtuous reason, because he's a virtuous person. I don't want to go through with this. Let them take the kingdom, and I'm out of here. And as the miscreants, the murderous, thieving, diabolical persons, Krishna wants them the earth planet to be relieved of those elements. So he gives arguments to Arjuna how to understand who you are and how to understand how to live your life by yoga principles. That's the scene. That's Bhagavad Gita in the midst of a larger history. So the topic for today and tomorrow is 2 of 6 themes discussing Gita values. And I'm calling this the Gita Values Project. And I'll give a little background behind the Gita Values Project. I'm a sannyasi. This is my garment, my spiritual robe, indicating I've been living a life of renunciation for over 50 years. I've never been married. And, all I know is, lifestyle-wise, a life of devotion to Krishna. I mean, I was doing other stuff before, but for that number of years. And the organization that I'm part of has some leadership. And in that leadership, there was a person who became the chairman. This is the history of how this came about. He was the chairman of this organization, ISKCON. And lo and behold, a very responsible person, he found out there's not a job description. Now there is. But when he became the chairman, there wasn't a job description. So he was scratching his head. How am I supposed to do this? The leadership role. And he understood, well, it should be principle based without the detail of this and that. So what he did was consulted learned fellows. Those learned fellows consulted some PhD scholars, Oxford University. And then the third group was people like me that kind of out and about and, hands-on practical people. So 3 groups of people got together and they came up with 6 principles that one should lead one's life by, whether it's an organization or your family or just yourself as an individual or group of individuals or a larger group of individuals. They're principles to live by. And they distilled it down to 6. And then they word crafted 6 paragraphs to describe each of these 6. And something I neglected to do, but I can send it to our moderator here. And I'll send you the 6 paragraphs for the 6 values. We're going to be discussing 2. Another time we can do the other 4. That's what the background of what the Gita values came from. And there's a space in which that project fits. It's spiritual values, values to live by, and spiritual culture. And culture, it's behaviors and speech, but behaviors and speech are resting upon values, and they interact with one another. Yes? We'll see shortly. So here's somebody I know has a PhD in organization structure, building organizations, whether it's a corporate or a country or a community, or they have a PhD in that topic, organizational structure. So this image came from him, and we'll see some people over there. I'll just stand here. It's an iceberg. And there's the part of the iceberg that everybody sees, that's what's above the surface of the water. And as we know, there's a whole lot more than what the eye can see. In an iceberg, there's a whole big thing down below the surface of the water. So the culture of a person or group of persons is compared to the iceberg of culture. And then there's the visible stuff for an iceberg, or for people, or for a person. And it's something that's visible, measurable, perceivable. The senses can touch it and evaluate it, and that's, in the language of culture, they call it artifacts. But you get the idea. It's a perceivable part of the culture of a person or group of persons. Let's just say one corporation buys out another corporation. One of the first things they do is this: what's the culture of this organization, and what do we want it to look like? Not like instead, but going forward in time, what it should look like. So they go through these steps. Or yourself as an individual. What do I want my life to be like? Not just like, what's my profession? Then you study something, and then you do that professionally. But what about the character inside? There's the observable part, but then there's something that drives the observable part. And that's the values that you hold. And that's going to determine the behaviors and speech and how you conduct yourself in this profession or that family or your circumstances of life. So what I'm saying here is values. Let's say a corporation, they make a mission statement. Any of you done that? Formulate a mission statement for a group of people. Most of us have done something like that. This organization stands for these things, and that's our values. And then you express those values through measurable, observable behaviors and speech. So that is to say, values drive observables, and observables can modify values over time. It happens. There's interplay. But the foundation, the subtle, the not observable, is the values. And you can get some sense of the values of a person or group by their behaviors and speech. Yes? So there's an interplay. And then there's this bottom of the iceberg that is deeply held beliefs that they don't change. Like, for example, from Bhagavad Gita, we're a spiritual entity. That doesn't change. My values can change, my behaviors and speech can change, but that doesn't change. So there's deeply held beliefs, implicit convictions, unchallenged certainties in the culture of an organization or a person or group of persons. So we're going to focus on the values, that's Gita values, but bear in mind, the bigger picture. Because when values are aligned with who you really are and the higher purpose of our existence, you've got a good system. Supposing you're out of alignment, it's like go to a chiropractor, get a spinal adjustment because it's very uncomfortable. So this time spent together today and tomorrow is looking at values that drive behaviors and are supported by unchallenged certainties that help us live our lives in a successful and effective way. This whole project was, again, it's the chairman of the organization wanting to align himself with what I should be doing for 1 year as the chairman without a job description. Challenging, but this is how it came about. Now, in the beginning, I mentioned this word I like, wisdom literature. And wisdom and knowledge is much more than information. Within Bhagavad Gita, there's information. Within life, we have information. But some people aren't very wise. You probably noticed. They have information, but they can misuse the information in ways that's hurtful to themselves and others. So the emphasis is on wisdom and knowledge more than information. And both are present in Bhagavad Gita. Now, last slide before we begin. This is all introduction. You'll see this again probably in the afternoon or tomorrow. So this is an image meant to show this is where we are, and that's where we want to go. It's called life. And in between, there's this big gap between where we want to be, where we are at present. And there's a nice Latin word called limen. And liminal is the adjective, and the limen is the noun, and limen is a space. For example, I'm looking at the door. In many cases, doors between the inside and the outside, there's a door, and beneath the door, there's a strip of wood. In carpentry, that's called a limen. And another example of limen is a patio. There's the outside, there's the inside, and there's the neither outside nor inside. In architecture, that's a limen. Liminal space. Neither here nor there. Some of you are a little familiar with the story of Lord Nrsingadev. He was killed neither inside nor outside. In a liminal space, because it's neither here nor there. So that's what liminal space means. And we're over here, and we have to cross this liminal space to get to where we want to go. It's called life. Because when you have a value, usually there's a purpose behind the value. There's like a goal. I want to get to something. And there's values, let's say for an organization. You state your values, you make your mission statement, but the mission statement is driving the participants towards something. And to get from where we are to where we want to go, it's like teenage life. You're neither a child or an adult. You're in that liminal space in between. And it can be uncomfortable being a teenager. You probably noticed. And life can be like that too, uncomfortable to get from where we are to where we want to go. Supposing you don't have a clear sense of direction, you're going to be uncomfortable anyways. But if you have a clear sense of direction to get to where you want to go, it's not easy. You can make mistakes and you can be misguided and so forth and so on. The good news from Bhagavad Gita is there's some assistance to get to where we want to go, and that's Krishna. And that's an essential part of Bhagavad Gita. So when hearing about these values, the reason for doing all of this is, when hearing about these values, don't be uncomfortable knowing that I'm not there yet, because all of us are not there yet. But the good news is that Krishna will help you if you practice yoga, because yoga means to connect with that source of everything. So that's all the preliminary. Now we're ready for the values. Whoops. I like images. So this is a nice lady. She's going somewhere, and she's kind of being creative as she gets there. She's kind of dark, so she's got a lamp in her hand, and there's a bird helping her set up the path to get there. So it can be a little bit like that, especially in the beginning of learning Gita values. It's a little uncomfortable. I'm not there yet. A little unclear, perhaps, what that value is and what the goal is. But here's value number 1, and you'll get a paragraph that spells it out. Samadarshana is the Sanskrit phrase. Sama means equal. Darshana means vision, to see. Samadarshana, equal vision. Value number 1. Now, what does it mean? Well, here's some examples. Here's a tree that you've never seen before. Look at all those different kinds of fruits all on one tree. So there's different fruits or different trees, different insects, different birds, different aquatics, different animals, more different animals, lots and lots and lots of differences. And how are we or anyone supposed to see anything other than so many differences amongst diversity or amongst human beings? So many nationalities, so many colors, so many languages, so many flags, so many differences. So how are you supposed to do this vision thing when there's so many differences? And even amongst the same group of people, there's different reactions, different emotions. That's the subtle. There's the gross. Then there's the subtle mind, the emotions within the feelings, thinking, feeling, willing, different life forms, different people, different situations, different exchanges. Where's the summa, the equality? How do you do this? See with equal vision. Challenge. And then the answer from Bhagavad Gita is see the soul within. Because all those different forms of life and insects and birds and et cetera, there's some consistency or some sameness within all those differences. The Gita's idea of equal vision speaks of the equality of all living beings, where life is respected regardless of the covering. So here's a nice illustration. It's illustrating a verse in Bhagavad Gita, Pandita Samadarshana. That's where the phrase is found in Bhagavad Gita. Sama Darshana. Pandita means a learned person. Pandita Samadarshana. A learned person sees with equal vision. And this is the learned person over here. This guy. And all those little sparks you see them within the gorilla, within the lion, within the this and the that, the aquatics, and there's all types of living entities that are that little spark, and some are really, really small, like microbial, but there's living entity within. So although the life form may be different, although the emotions may be different, the language is different, the species is different, there's something that's the same, sama, darshana. And Bhagavad Gita teaches us that respecting differences, respect is an important word, seeing differences but respecting differences, and at the same time there's a sameness within. The commonality is the soul within, the unchanging, that bottom of the iceberg, the unchanging reality. There's a spiritual energy or spark of life or soul within every living entity. All living beings are spirit souls. Another illustration of the same thing. This is illustrating verse from Bhagavad Gita. Pandita Samadarshana. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani gavi hastini shuni chaiva swapaki cha pandita samadarshana. A learned person sees with equal vision all these different differences. They see the differences. It's not that you turn your discriminating power off. You can discriminate and see this is this and that's that, and you see differences, no problem. And you see the sameness at the same time. And respect goes not for the covering. You may like or dislike the covering. That's the mind. But then the intelligence can, if properly oriented, can see the sameness within. That's us, that little skinny guy. You'll see this guy several times. That's the soul. According to the Vedic wisdom, souls are eternal. They don't change. Coverings change. Emotions change. The mind changes. Bodies change. No problem. There's something that's unchanging. The eternal soul, the soul is conscious. We discussed this yesterday. Conscious and consciousness, both. That's a quality of that eternal soul, that who we really are. And by nature, blissful. So why is it people want to be happy? Because it's our nature. And you're feeling unhappy, you don't like it. You want to be happy instead of unhappy. So you make adjustments and make adjustments and make adjustments and make adjustments. And it may look like happiness, and then something happens and it's no longer happiness, it's something else. Because material energy keeps moving. And it's not who we are anyways. It's not what real happiness is anyways. So what real happiness anyways? Is to know who you are and be connected with who you are and the source of all things. That's yoga. It's not just, notionally is one thing, then factually, that's a Gita value, Pandita Samadarshana. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And somebody that looks a lot different than me is going to say the same thing. That fellow there, I hope the recording works.
The reason why spirituality is important is because it is reality. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Who I am and what I am is not my body. It's not even my personality. It's not the trauma I suffered. It's not what I've been through. That there is a little spark of the divine inside of me. There's hard data that shows around mental health and well-being that having serenity, meaning, purpose, a losing of oneself to a transcendent self of the divine increases greatly the quality of our lives. We're a part of something much greater and much more beautiful than ourselves. And in living in that state can greatly enrich your life.
And he looks a little different than I do. But the message is the same message. It's Bhagavad Gita message. Sometimes, not too often these days, but sometimes I've been called upon to speak to children's audiences. So one of the things that I do with children's audiences, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but this is what I say to them. Could you kindly point to your head? That's easy. Then continue. Okay, now please point to your arm. They point to their arm. Point to your leg. Point to your leg. And then, et cetera, et cetera. And then ask them, okay, now point to you. And commonly they go like this, like I'm the body. They say, wait a minute. You say, my arm, my leg, my head, my foot, there's the owner of, and then there's the object that's the owner. But me is not just a combination of all those body parts. Then this is where the soul is situated. Point to your soul. They get it. I mean, they giggle and all that, but they get it. Now, conceptually, just like that's information. Realization is another thing. Bhagavad Gita gives information, but it gives wisdom more than information. It's like to get to the place where you actually experience who you are, and then in turn who others are, despite their covering of species or culture or language or this or that. And that's the sameness, that's the sama darshanaha. That's a value that Bhagavad Gita teaches. That soul that's within gives life to all the other body parts. The gross and the subtle, including mind and intelligence, are animated by the spark of life. And the soul is really small. According to the Vedic wisdom, the Upanishads, here's Svetasvatara Upanishad, the translation of the Sanskrit verse reads, when the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again, each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. That's pretty tiny. Like sub-microscopic. You can't see it. The soul is of a different energy, but it's also so small you can't see it. But yet, that soul animates not only a squirrel, but the same soul within the body of an elephant. It's the same soul, different covering, different behavior, they make different sounds, but the animating force is that little tiny. So the spark is very powerful. Now, almost done. Here's Bhagavad Gita chapter 15. There's 18 chapters in Bhagavad Gita. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So there's a relationship between the body and the seat of consciousness, the soul. And we get the particular body corresponding, as many of you know, according to karma and according to guna. That means the mode of nature. That's another topic out of the 6. So, human form of life has very developed senses. All 5 of the knowledge acquiring senses grouped around the mind are more refined. Although, like say, dogs can hear vibration frequencies that we can't hear. So we're not better than dogs, but they just, all the senses are more developed in a human being compared to other species. And although bodies are different, mentioned at the very beginning, differences, every living entity is an amazing spirit soul covered by consciousness. So this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 3. We're almost done. Bhagavad Gita chapter 3. The covering of consciousness is compared in degrees by the modes of nature. Embryo covered by the womb, like living entity that's within the womb of a mother, has a covered consciousness that's compared to like that of a tree. Or a mirror covered by dust is like less covering than the living entity within the womb, but In the animal form, they're also covered, different species of different animals. And the humans, compared to fire, covered by smoke. So there is such a thing as consciousness that's not covered. That's called self-realization. The goal of Bhagavad Gita, the goal of life, is to come to the stage where their consciousness is not covered but is freed. You still have a body, but you're not impacted by the body because you have Samadarshana. You have spiritual consciousness. It's called Brahma Bhuta in the language of Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, this is the Bhagavad Gita verse, the Samadarshana verse. Pandita Samadarshana, sees with equal vision. That's the humble sage, this guy here. And he's taking a look at, there's a Brahmana, there's a cow, there's a dog, and that fellow chasing him, that's the dog eater. And then there's an elephant. So there's different coverings, but there's something within that's the nets. And there's a Gita value. If you want to live your life in higher consciousness, if you want a leader in your life or a leader of a group of people, Samadarshana is the starting point. This vision awards personhood to all, links everyone with the divine grace and consequently with each other. So universality is built into it. Equal vision begins with seeing ourselves as who we are and seeing other living entities who they truly are. That skinny guy that in the magnifying glass, that's us. Okay. Now, this is a discussion reflection section. So I'm going to start and then invite each of you to find another person or two or three and have a little discussion on what are some of the challenges that you experience to see different people with equal vision. For example, think of somebody in your life now or in the past with whom you had some difficulty and how you're supposed to see that person with whom you had difficulty with equal vision. The behavior is one thing, the person is another thing. That's the point. With your inner vision, consciously see that person as a spirit soul, no matter how badly they may have behaved externally. Got it? This is a little discussion exercise. Go find a person or two or three, and I'm going to sit down and let you discuss. This is to internalize the message for this little session, the Samadarshana message. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Well, I can see you're an enthusiastic group, especially when it comes to conversation. And nobody fell asleep during the presentation. So we could do one of a few things. One is from those of your discussion groups, would somebody like to volunteer and share something that came out of that discussion group that you think might be beneficial for others to hear? That's one option. Another is just take questions and answers. Another is we can just part our ways and go somewhere to do something else. So any sharing, reflections on what you discussed or what you heard or something that's puzzling?
racist outright, or people who break the law, for instance, in that kind of situation, it can be very difficult to um, differentiate the soul and their behavior.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's easy for us to just react to that and say, this is a bad person, and there's no need for me to understand him because what he did by thousands and millions of people, that's just bad outright. So why not really see it? So it isn't my way, you can just continue, because that's the easier option. Yeah, so that was what we were thinking about. But the idea of separating the behavior and the person, she mentioned that, and that I think it's a very beautiful one because that will allow us a gateway to even break apart and try to understand the person.
I'd like to respond. If someone is behaving in a way that's hurtful or disrespectful or other, bad, mean, often it means there's pain inside. They were hurt, and to turn their attention away from that hurt, the victim has now become the perpetrator. Standard stuff. So we don't like the bad behavior, the bad speech, or the hurtful something. But even on the material side, we can recognize where that speech or behavior that's bad or hurtful or mean or something cruel, where's it coming from? It's conditioning. And to see past that, it doesn't mean you like the bad behavior. You embrace the bad behavior. Prabhupada's example, when you see a tiger, you don't go and embrace the tiger. You can be mauled. But you respect from a distance because he's in a tiger's body because. There's many other things to say. Let's see if others would like to share. I speak too much. I'd like to hear some of you speak something, anything.
I think what we discussed is really, we believe that we see as a baby is born very pure, very nice and very good, almost perfect in this way, right? And then through growing up, the experiences, what they have learned or what they have felt and experienced, mold them into something. So it could be good, bad, or whatever. So we're trying to say like, okay, if a person hurts you, for example, a person does something bad to you, and you want to try, and the challenging part is trying to see that person despite him having hurt you, you want to see that person as a perfect spiritual soul, which I guess in an ideal situation is easier said than done. But me also they may find it very difficult to look at the spiritual soul in that sense, right?
Yeah.
We'll think, okay, we now that we understand this, so we try and consciously look at three of us being sort of past what we are externally and we see each other internally as the spiritual soul, then I think it works. But if we go out in the real world and practice, what will happen is I think we get taken advantage of because every time people come and scam me and then I'll say, oh yeah, look at him as spiritual soul. And I continue to be scammed. I think this is what.
Okay. You going to take the microphone from her? I have two comments. One is I want to edit the preamble of what you said. Because living entities that take birth don't come with a clean slate. There's baggage. Guna and karma baggage. Karma everyone knows. And guna means modes of nature. Good, passion, and ignorant. So living entities born have the modes of nature, good, passion, or ignorant, and their karma. and it's part of the package of a newborn child. They may not exhibit it immediately, but it's part of the package. And the second comment, and what you three shared and you shared on behalf of the others, there's a what to do given the package, and then behaviors that are good, passion, or ignorant, or destructive, ignorant, destructive. Training and education. That's a phrase that in our spiritual practice we use all the time, because all of us, like you, all of us were born with that package, whatever it was from previous and this life. And then what do? So it's training and education as part, a little bit like what's happening just today, like just now, is it's a concept. And then you take the concept, it's possible to take the concept and then model it. And as one who's modeling it, that's an educator. It's not just speaking something, but modeling it. And teach people by your own example and your interactions with them to be a spirit soul that doesn't identify with the body of themselves and others. So how to not react emotionally or physically when somebody does something that's out to lunch or hurtful. You have to pat them on the head, but you don't condemn them either, because they're hurting somewhere inside, and they've got their conditioning like I do. So it's a training. Education is a way to go beyond that covering. You got to have a good trainer. You have to have a willingness. Good receiver, good broadcaster, good receiver, and then that's how Bhagavad Gita works well. Easier said than done, but that's the principle. That's the principle. Anything else? So, other than sharing, if you want to raise a question or some doubt or some discomfort, something like that, put your hand up in the air, and she's going to give you the microphone. Okay.
I'm gonna remove.
Speak slowly for my benefit. Thank you.
To a difficulty or a lack of suffering. So, comes in multiple ways. The struggle and the beauty of suffering. You don't feel enjoy your own suffering. It's something that you learn step by step, because things do get increasingly difficult in different ways and in different forms. The question is that only the next level as the soul learn that becomes more very oh, journey and go up. Your suffering heavy to bear. Isn't that a bad thing? But how would you frame it in a more beautiful way? And is that something that you would expect?
No.
Yes, I so there is a kind of amount, the higher you go, the air becomes thinner. Less people will follow you up because the journey is increasingly difficult out there. But that's where you want to be, because from there you can voice out to the forest, the values which is much larger now. Your echo be like much clearer. Yeah, I know. I don't know. Oh, yeah, alternate galactic realm. Yeah.
Okay, the two metaphors may be what somebody experiences, but it's not what everybody experiences. If you take the first one, it's not necessarily that the complexity increases as you become more elevated in consciousness. Rather, the extent of the complication, entanglement, dirt that's within, I don't even recognize it's there if I'm in lower consciousness. I'm just living it. And as I'm living, moving in the direction of higher consciousness, I start noticing things that were always there that I just never noticed before. There's a nice example. A nice example is, supposing you go into a house or an apartment or something that hasn't been used for decades. There's dust settled everywhere. But you like the place, you want to make it clean. So as you're cleaning, dust is flying all over the place. And it can be even hard to breathe. But because the dust has settled for so long and been neglected for so long that it takes a while. But after cleaning and cleaning and cleaning and cleaning and cleaning, eventually it becomes very nice. But you didn't know how unclean it was until you started cleaning. So like that, that's a metaphor that I heard my spiritual masters say. The process of spiritual awakening, it's not that, or higher, moving towards higher consciousness, it's not that it becomes more complicated or more difficult and more challenging. It's just more subtle. Things that we didn't even know were there. And as you go forward, there's this one and there's that one and there's the other one. There's Sanskrit terms, anartha nivritti, eradication of unwanted things that I didn't even know were there. Keep going. The cleansing process, stay with it, follow it properly, because there's manuals that tell how to do the anartha nivritti program, cleansing of unwanted things. And you do it properly with proper guidance and it becomes clean. And it doesn't get more complex. There's an initial spike, but then becomes different. And the other metaphor you used was climbing a mountain. Just before coming to Singapore, we went to Badrinath. You know where Badrinath is? You've been there. Those of you that haven't been there, the air is really thin. It's 11,000 feet. I don't know what it is in meters, 11,000 feet. And then to visit the places where we visited, I was told the NUS stands for the National University of Steps. Steps and steps and steps and steps and steps. And the air is thin. So, not just me because I'm older, but many people had to sit down and, catch your breath and up 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 and up. Walking down was easier. But spiritual life isn't like walking, up a mountain, because it's a plane of consciousness. It's not thin air, or it has difficult to breathe when that realm of higher consciousness. The metaphor doesn't fit. The struggle part fits, but the struggle has to do with the contamination and not with, a mountain. The metaphor doesn't fit. I'm just objecting or editing the metaphor. It's more like the liminal space example, where we are, where we want to go. And the discomfort is always uncomfortable to go from where you are to where you want to go. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a teenager. Just go from where you are to where you want to go. And there's discomfort. The struggle. It's like even getting there. But there's a purpose, and the purpose is the higher consciousness purpose, and is knowing who you are, living that life of who you are. The world around you doesn't need to change. The inside needs to change. So your experience of the world around you changes. What your seat of consciousness changes. The world may or may not change, for the better, for the worse. It's a little bit, another metaphor that I like is waves of a river. That's a Vedic model. Because sometimes there's more wind, so there's more waves. Sometimes there's less wind, so it's more smooth. But there's always the rise and the fall of the waves. And that's life. And yet the acceptance is the rise and the fall of what's out there, while your concentration is you don't become not tuned into what's out there, but you're very tuned into what's in. So sometimes and sometimes. Yeah. As the waves may rise and fall. No problem. It's just the nature of the river of life. And then while I'm passing through this river of life, who am I? What's my purpose through the ups and the downs and the swirls and the whirlpools and the movements of the material energy, some people being nice and some people being not nice, and etc. What's the purpose? So that's one of the Gita values. We'll get there. This is the Sama Darsana value. Behind you, this nice lady has something she wants to add. What's up? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Morgan, do it also that I'm spirit?
Yes. Yes.
Illumination. Maybe when you look at I just want spirit and soul are
That's interchangeable, synonymous. There's a nice Sanskrit word, if you like it, Atma. And you can translate Atma in different ways. One of the fundamental meanings is that which is eternal, the eternal conscious self, soul, spirit, interchangeable. But Atma can mean other things. In sense, it depends on the context. So it can mean the body, can mean the mind, and it can mean the soul. So that we're in this package. But so back to your question, soul, spirit, self, with the right lens, they all mean the same. Then somebody may have a different meaning depending upon their culture or their use of the word or something. But the meaning here is the spark of life within, the seat of consciousness, soul, self, spirit, Atma. It's synonymous. Is that all right? Does that address your question?
so I say ghost. Is that
Yeah, it's related. You want to know what a ghost is? Is that what you're asking? Okay. Okay. According to the Vedic conception, there's the gross body, there's the subtle body, and there's the soul. Supposing somebody commits suicide, they annihilate the gross body, but the subtle body would have had a natural duration of embodiment in a gross body, but they interrupted it. So then, that's what a ghost is. The gross body is no longer available, but the subtle body lingers. What's the subtle body? Mind, intelligence, and false ego. Mana, buddhi, and ahankara. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. So ghosts are souls that have their gross body dismantled, but they're in an interim phase before there's another gross body that's by nature's arrangement to be warded. So they're hanging around in a ghost body. And they have desires. That's where the desires are in the mind. And they don't have a, so they try to take over a gross body. Somebody that's intoxicated or somebody that's asleep or somebody whose consciousness is low, they try to take over and enjoy through that body that's ghostly haunted. Intoxicated people may have more than one ghost inhabiting the body. And they talk crazy things. It's not ghost acting through the body. Then there are ways to get rid of ghosts. The ghost is like, can go away. Then the soul that's occupying that body becomes normal again. How to help the ghost? Well, that's a nice question. And we're going to hear about that tonight, the temple. I'm going to narrate a story of how a ghost got relieved from having a ghost body. Stay tuned, 5:30 to 6:15. That's our topic. But the principle is spiritual sound. Spiritual sound releases the entanglement of the ghost from the ghostly condition by elevation of consciousness through a spiritual sound. It depends on their karma, where they go to. That's right. Because they're either A or B. They'll get another body because the punishment for having killed the gross body, wrongly, unfairly or unjustly, they're released from that bondage so they can go on to another body. Or B, they may no longer take a material body. That means the subtle body is also relinquished and the soul goes to this place of higher consciousness, the spiritual realm, where souls belong. So A or B. The remedy is there, but the destination depends upon the consciousness of that particular soul. Everything depends upon consciousness. Even now, what to speak of the ghost body. There's someone behind you that's got her hand. Give her this microphone. Yes. Yes. That's correct. That's correct. Now, I'm not so clear if supposing somebody's murdered, that can be a karma event, and then they don't become a ghost because they were murdered. There's a natural duration of life, but their karma may terminate that natural duration by that event. So the unnatural termination of the body, like suicide. Not necessarily. It depends on the karma of the individual. Supposing somebody dies in a car accident, supposing. It doesn't mean that means that person who died in the car accident becomes a ghost for the duration they would have lived if they hadn't been in the car accident. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It's subtle, involved in karma. Okay. Anything over on this side? Yeah. What's your question? Yes. Yes. That's a big question. Uh-huh. You win the prize for today. The best question prize. Now, what time are we supposed to end? Okay, we have 6 minutes. There's two parts of how I'd like to respond. One is self-realization, or knowing who you are, really is compared sometimes to the rising of the sun, meaning the sun is always there, who we are is always there, but sometimes it's the dark of night and we can't see the sun. We can't, similarly, using this metaphor, we can't see who we are because we're identifying in darkness with who we aren't. And we identify with who we aren't, although it's in darkness. And so self-realization is sometimes compared to the rising of the sun. It's gradual, 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 gradual. And you've seen the sunrise, and before as the sun comes on over the horizon, there's light because it's rising, and then you can see, boop, just it's big and orange, and then it gets smaller and brighter. And when that stage comes, your question is how to, but I'm also describing the sequence. And it's something like when you know who you are, there are symptoms. Yenatma suprasidati, in the language of the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a happiness within that's genuine. It's not changing with time and circumstance. It's genuine. Just like smooth, like when you eat in capacity, you don't have to have someone tell you you've eaten enough. You can tell them. You're satisfied, no thank you. I want more this or that and the other. That metaphor, because after some time you get hungry again. But using that metaphor, there's a satisfaction. It's who we really are. And you don't have to be told. There are symptoms, lakshana in the Sanskrit word, there's symptoms of one who is self-realized. And that's described in Bhagavad Gita. This and this and this and this, the symptoms of a self-realized soul. But they can attest to it themselves. Because na sochati na kangsati, neither hankering nor lamenting. It's in Bhagavad Gita. Brahmabhuta prasanatma. There's a happiness within, atma, prasanatma. Neither hankering for something out there, hankering what I don't have, lamenting over what I lost, because there's satisfaction within. Prasanatma. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu. Same as the samadharma. Same message. You see all living entities equal. That's a symptom. So it's a gradual process by following the linking of the spark back here, the spark, or the soul, or the self, or spirit, linking that with the source. That's yoga. It's like taking a spark that falls from a fire and lands on the ground. You put that piece of carbon now back in the fire, and it becomes a spark again. You connect the part with the whole. The whole is this metaphor of this fire. It becomes fiery. No longer just a piece of carbon, it's fire. So there's symptoms, lakshana. characteristics, and gradual follow the process of eating. You get to the point where I'm satisfied. No, thank you. I don't need more. I'm not hankering for anything more. I'm fully satisfied. Thank you. Yeah. Well, but that can mean things to a passionate person, or it can mean something to a mode of goodness person. Living life to its fullness can be by if one is in the mode of passion, it's do. I'm living life to its fullest. Do. Passion. Not that. Living life to its fullest is a consciousness evaluation. And one may be very active, one be in between, there's different personalities, types. But the main thing is the sense of satisfaction. Atma, the soul, suprasidati, full satisfaction. So means very. Prasanna means happiness or contentment. Suprasanna, Atma suprasanna. That's the symptom. You say living life to its fullest can mean a lot of different things to different people. Get as intoxicated as I can is living life to its fullest. That's not higher consciousness.
So people say things like it's only pre.
Yeah, we got some. Got some. You got it. That's yoga. When the darkness is dispelled by the rising of the sun, the darkness is no longer. The darkness is the absence of the sunlight.
Because very often many of the time oh,
It's true. But spiritual life doesn't happen because of karma.
so we can actually change.
Oh, absolutely. Not can. That's Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. You got it. So it's time to end. The 10:45 bell is ringing. Oh, the quiet one wants to say something. Go ahead. Do it again. I was distracted. Someone becomes unconscious. Higher consciousness. Yes, okay, got it. Then Punar Janma Na. Punar means again. Janma means birth. Na means not. Is it possible? The answer is yes. Is it possible for the person to become self-realized? And B, if one becomes self-realized, that one won't take birth again? Yes and yes. But supposing one doesn't become self-realized, Purnarjanma, because there's modes of nature, and karma, both bind the living entity and takes another birth and takes another birth and takes another birth, another set of parents, another set of who knows what, where, species. So to cut that birth and death cycle, it's higher consciousness. And when the higher consciousness comes to the stage of knowing who you are, and that source from which you and all other living entities come, Punarjanma Na. There's verses in Bhagavad Gita that say that specifically. Welcome to the club. No more birth and death club.